Hi, my name is Patricia Baker, and this is the story of how I realized that sometimes the people closest to you, your own family, can be the biggest problem for you, especially when it comes to business. I say these words not with resentment, no, rather with the tired bitterness of someone who has tried too long to earn recognition in the eyes of those whose love, it would seem, should be unconditional. For more than 10 years, I gave everything I had, my time, my energy, my ideas to our small family technology company, which grew out of a small business that no one except my father and me seemed to really want to work on. What started as a small computer repair shop in a quiet shopping mall eventually turned into a thriving software manufacturing business with a turnover of $110 million. I was proud. I believed that together we had achieved success. But I didn't expect that success could arouse envy even at home. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. Let me go back to the beginning. My father opened a computer repair shop about 30 years ago, when computers were still a rarity, and craftsmen who could fix something more complicated than a buzzing hard drive were valued almost like surgeons. It was his passion project, the realization of a dream that had eluded him throughout his youth. Although it didn't make him a lot of money, it meant a lot to him. He ran the company with pride, often working long hours just to keep the lights on, while always struggling with mounting bills, dissatisfied customers, and the indifference of the outside world. Back then, it was barely enough to pay the bills. But for him, it was a legacy, a part of himself, a tiny island of meaning that he stubbornly did not want to lose. And although our house was rarely filled with joy, and we shared dinners more out of necessity than out of a desire to be together, I felt that something important was being born there, among the dusty motherboards and boxes of hard drives. I was the quietest in the family, the only one who stayed to help my father, and at the same time I was working on getting a degree in computer science at our local college, combining my studies with a tedious, but for some reason native job. My sister Kelly, on the other hand, was a golden child, straight, top of her class, and later a student at one of the most prestigious business schools in the country, whom everyone spoke of with respect and hope, even if they themselves did not fully understand what they were teaching there. Everyone always expected big things from her. "Patricia, you're wasting your potential here," I was told over and over again, as if helping my father and loving the cause were something shameful or pathetic. When Kelly came to me during the college holidays, she told me that we need to do more and strive for more, with a slight reproach in her voice and that cold gleam in her eyes that people who are confident in their rightness possess. But I saw something she didn't see. I saw such an opportunity in our small shop. While Kelly was studying business theory, I gained practical programming experience and learned about the real problems faced by small businesses, the vulnerability of cyber systems, the lack of automation tools, and the suffering of owners who have neither the time nor the budget for complex solutions. I didn't just dream, I built, patiently, methodically, stubbornly. In my senior year of college, I created our first original program, a simple but effective inventory management tool for small businesses that was born in the evenings, with the hum of an old air conditioner, from lines of code written with coffee and insomnia. It wasn't flashy, but it worked well and was affordable, and that was the main advantage in a world where small businesses were drowning in an ocean of inaccessible solutions. At first, Dad wasn't sure. He didn't think that people would buy it. It was too hard for him to believe that our small workshop could offer something that someone would be willing to pay for. But when the first few local businesses started acquiring licenses and distributing information, he changed his mind, slowly, cautiously, but sincerely. "Maybe you found something worthwhile, kid," he said with a rare smile, the one that meant he was really proud when he was a kid. For a moment, I really felt that I was being seen, that my efforts were not going unnoticed. This offer has fueled me for many years, reminding me that even in a world where you remain a silent girl to many, you can achieve recognition. After graduating from university, I threw myself into my work. I worked 15 hours a day, 6 days a week. I was involved in everything: development, customer support, marketing. Slowly but surely, the store turned into a software development company, and every step along the way was mine, not from someone else's input, not from guidance, but from personal experience, trial and error, sleepless nights and days when I didn't even have the strength to speak. We have expanded our range of services and attracted more customers by going beyond the local community and moving to nationwide partnerships. At that time, my mother looked at me with mild concern. "Don't overwork yourself, Patricia," she said, bringing my dinner to the office, carefully placing the food container on the edge of the table, as if she was afraid to scare off my concentration. "You need a life outside of that." But I was driven not only by ambition, but also by the need to prove myself, to show my family that I was more than a quiet girl in the background. After 5 stressful years filled with daily struggles, compromises, failures, and unexpected insights, our business finally reached an important milestone of $3 million in annual revenue, and for me it was not just a financial indicator, not just an amount that could be tabulated or noted in a report, but rather proof of that my hard work, my dedication, and my faith in the idea were not in vain. It was a huge undertaking, a real triumph, which I did not shout about, but which was felt by every cell of my exhausted body and mind. That's when everything started to change, as if success itself had brought with it not only honor and respect, but also shadows that had crept into cracks that I hadn't noticed, too busy trying to keep the building afloat. Out of the blue, Kelly announced that she was coming home. Her voice, as always, sounded clear, authoritative, as if every word had already been coordinated with reality. She left her high-ranking job at a leading consulting firm in Florida and, according to her, is ready to take a rightful place in the company, as if this place had been empty all this time, waiting for her, despite the fact that I continued this way without leaving the office for a day, both in the rain and in the heat, and on hopeless evenings. We were sitting at the dinner table when she said it so casually, as if it had been preordained, as if fate had long ago assigned her a chair at the head and me a place in the shade. "With my experience in business," she said confidently, smiling the way people smile who don't doubt their words and aren't used to hearing objections. "We could take the situation to a new level," she said, as if everything that had been achieved up to that point was just a preparatory stage for her real entry into the game. Dad looked at her with pride in his eyes, and in that look there was not a drop of doubt, not a shadow of concern, just blind, fatherly faith. "That's wonderful, Princess," he said, and at that moment it seemed to me that the air was heavier and the sounds were muffled. "We could use your professional approach here," he added, as if negating my contribution to building all this from scratch. And that's how I felt that everything had stopped, as if all my work had frozen in place, like a broken clock, and only an unbearable, quiet pain was bubbling inside me. My fork hovered in the air, and my thoughts raced at breakneck speed, colliding, whirling like autumn leaves in a hurricane. The company that I had built with sleepless nights and tireless efforts was now offered to Kelly only because she had a prestigious degree and the right words. Not deeds, not projects, not history, but words. No mention of the years I've worked. There is no recognition of how we got to this point in the first place, how a stable, reliable, and profitable system grew out of a tiny store. That's when I realized that success doesn't always protect you. Sometimes he can become a target for you, even from the people you love most, those for whose approval you once walked this path. But I kept my thoughts to myself and decided to play along, hoping that everything would work out, that maybe eventually Kelly would see reality for what it is, and we would find a way to each other, as sisters and as partners. I didn't want to create tension in the presence of my family or our staff, because the atmosphere and the team has always been important to me. It was the invisible glue that kept us afloat during difficult days. So I smiled, nodded, and tried to be a team player, even if everything inside was protesting against this theater, in which I was once again assigned the role of an extra. That's how Kelly became co-CEO, despite her lack of experience in our industry, despite the fact that she didn't know our customers, our products, or the specifics of the technical tasks we solved on a daily basis. Dad thought it would be nice for the company to have someone with her experience and prestigious education in senior positions. He believed that her diploma and connections would open doors for us that had previously been closed. He said that this would impress investors and improve our image, as if external brilliance could replace years of patient work. I didn't agree, but I accepted it, because at that time I still hoped that it would be possible to find a balance between visibility and content. Since then, I've focused on what I did best: creating products, managing operations, and working closely with our customers, people who trusted us not because of marketing slogans, but because we solved their real problems. Kelly, on the other hand, became the face of the company. She was involved in marketing, public speaking, and investor relations, playing the role of the charismatic leader everyone wants to see on magazine covers. The next 7 years felt like a strange gap, as if the company split into two halves: visible, glossy and bright, and invisible, but vital, without which nothing would work. While I was immersed in the code and team meetings, making sure that our software remained innovative and useful, Kelly attended technical conferences, accepted awards, and gave interviews about how to become a successful woman in technology, telling stories that sounded like she had created the very tools to create who I spent sleepless nights with. Despite the imbalance, the company continued to grow. The company's annual revenue reached $110 million, and this seemed to justify all the internal distortions and understatements. But the more we achieved, the more strained our relationship became. Kelly started not inviting me to important meetings. She made important decisions without telling me about it, and gradually began to put me on the back burner, treating me like an employee of a company that I built with my own hands. And then came Dad's 65th birthday. Kelly, of course, took over the party without even asking my opinion. She rented a large ballroom in the most luxurious hotel in the city, surrounded herself with a team of organizers, designers, and PR specialists. It wasn't so much a birthday celebration as a business event full of investors, clients, and distinguished guests, each of whom received logo booklets, event schedules, and, of course, acknowledgments on Kelly's behalf. Kelly always did this. Every move had to serve a purpose, every word to strengthen her image, every action to bring her closer to the next career achievement. I arrived early to help with the preparations, because despite everything, despite the tension, despite the unbearably springy distrust beneath the surface, I was still the same Patricia who had been trying for years to be above conflicts, to be a support, to be a part of the team, even if the team itself gradually forgot who first put the brick in the base of the building. I was wearing a simple black dress, nothing flashy, but elegant enough to match the occasion, and modest enough not to be conspicuous. I wasn't going to compete with Kelly in showmanship, but as it turned out, even my restraint was like a splinter for her. When Kelly saw me, she frowned, her gaze darting from the hem of my dress to my hair, gathered in a smooth bun, and lingered on my shoes. "Couldn't you have tried a little better?" she whispered sharply, leaning toward me with an icy grin. "These are important people, Patricia." I bit my tongue. I didn't want to argue, not this evening, not in this setting. I focused only on greeting the arriving guests and making sure everything went smoothly, because if anyone knew how to ensure the smooth operation of the process, from the check-in system to seating, it was me. The room filled up quickly, the smell of perfume, the thud of heels, laughter, glasses of champagne pouring, everything mixed into a cocktail of glossy splendor and businesslike pretended politeness. Everyone was chatting, drinking, and chatting. Kelly moved from group to group, smiling like a politician on an election campaign, with polished plasticity, with perfectly chosen intonations and phrases that seemed sincere only to those who did not know her the way I did. I stayed in the shadows, making sure everything was perfect, checking how the lighting was working, whether there were enough waiters, whether the drinks were running out, so that no one would notice a single crack in the facade of this carefully constructed evening. Then dinner was served, and Kelly got up to make a speech. I put down the cutlery, expecting her to say something heartfelt, share memories of her father or thank the team, because if not the family, then who else should talk about sincerity? But instead, she dropped a bomb. "Tonight we celebrate our father's 65th birthday," she began, her voice loud and clear, piercing the hall like a spotlight. "It's time to share exciting news about the future of Green Shin Technologies." I blinked. News? What's the news? I looked around, as if hoping to find someone who knew more than I did, but all eyes were on Kelly. The board of directors decided that the company needed strong, unified leadership to move forward, she continued, standing at the stage as if on a podium. For too long we have been held back by outdated methods and unwillingness to change. I felt the blood drain from my face. What are the board meetings? I have never been invited to any event or discussion where such fateful decisions were made. That's why it takes effect immediately. Her voice became even more distinct. I will be the only CEO. There was complete silence in the room. I could hear forks clinking on plates as people turned to look at me. Kelly continued to remain calm and confident, as if this was just an item on the agenda. Some people are better suited for technical positions than for leadership positions, she said with a slight grin. My sister Patricia is doing a good job of keeping our systems running, but we need a vision. We need visionary leadership. And honestly, Patricia, you're just not cut out for this level of business. I froze in my chair. My stomach clenched as if I'd been hit. I turned to Dad, waiting for him to say something in my defense, that his voice, even if not loud, would violate this injustice. But he didn't do it. He nodded and smiled as if this was exactly what he wanted, as if everything was going according to his personal script. Mom stared at her plate, silent and pale, her hands shaking as if she was trying her best not to spill the soup. Kelly wasn't done. The truth is, she said, raising her glass, that Patricia's outdated ideas and lack of proper business training have become a burden. It's time for her to gracefully step aside. The silence in the room was heavier than ever. I felt judged and pitted. People were whispering to each other, and some avoided my gaze, as if my pain was contagious. Everything I worked for, all the sacrifices, all the nights I stayed up working on the code, all the clients I convinced to believe in us, it was all destroyed in front of hundreds of people. And the worst part is that my own family did it. Everything that I had built, everything that I had worked so hard for, was taken away from me, right in front of all the people I had known for many years, with whom I had shared the path, victories and failures. I stood up slowly. The sound of my chair dragging on the polished floor of the ballroom rang out like a thunderclap, making everyone turn around. Everyone expected drama. Maybe I'll cry. Maybe I'll scream. But I didn't give them that much pleasure. Instead, I picked up my purse, calmly walked over to my father's desk and placed a small gift box in front of him. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said in a low, even voice. Then I turned around, holding my head high, and walked out of the room full of whispers, noise, and smug smiles. I didn't look back. Later that evening, sitting in my home office, where every corner reminded me of years of work, of projects that had become reality, of nights spent among lines of code and bundles of drafts, I was surrounded by awards, patents, and certificates bearing my name, a name that had not appeared in glossy articles and it didn't sound from the stands, but it was known by everyone who really understood how this business was created. I made a decision, not on a wave of emotions, not in anger, but with the cold, pure clarity peculiar only to those who have long learned to restrain feelings for the sake of a goal. Let them celebrate today, I thought, peering at the flickering monitor as if it were a window into tomorrow. Let them believe that they have won, let them believe in their impeccable strategy and unconditional triumph. Kelly may have thought that she had outsmarted me once again, as if on a chessboard, but she forgot one very important thing that would soon turn her so-called victory into the worst mistake of her life. She underestimated me, as I had always been underestimated, from the very beginning, when I stood behind the counter and fixed old motherboards while she learned to speak beautifully. I opened my laptop and started typing. A quiet, barely noticeable smile appeared on my lips, not gloating, but rather satisfied, mature, calm. Tomorrow was going to be very, very interesting, because there are many ways to run a successful company, and not all of them start with press releases and filming in the studio. And while Kelly was busy posing for magazine covers and giving interviews, I spent 12 years learning about real business from the very basics, starting with customer reviews and ending with legal agreements. The next morning turned out to be clear and bright, with that transparent light that seems to emphasize the purity of intentions and determination of actions. I arrived at the office before everyone else and waited, calmly, without haste, watching the sun reflected in the glass partitions, as employees one by one passed through the lobby, unaware of how differently this day could end. At 9 o'clock sharp, Kelly walked in there as if she owned the place, with an attitude honed by years of attention, accompanied by her father, who stood proudly by her side, as if they had just won the lottery. Their faces were full of pride and satisfaction, two people confident in their own triumph, confident that the path was paved and there were no more obstacles. I couldn't wait to see their faces crumble. "Patricia," Kelly said, sounding surprised and annoyed, as if my presence was disrupting the script. "What are you doing here? I thought that after last night you would at least have the decency to stay at home." I smiled, remembering the email I sent at 4 in the morning to every major customer, partner, and senior employee at Greenshin Technologies, a letter that wasn't aggressive or accusing, but just reminded them to whom they owed what now bears the logo of their success. "Just finishing up some business, dear sister," I replied calmly. "Since you're here, let's talk about the future of the company." "There's nothing to discuss," Dad said firmly, his voice sounding as if it had already been decided and definitively. "Now Kelly's running everything. The council has already approved it." The board," I said, taking out my tablet, and the smile on my lips became a little wider, but no less calm. "Let's talk about this, okay?" I connected my tablet to the big screen in the conference room, called up the interface with a familiar gesture and opened a folder containing documents that could change the whole situation. While Kelly was busy organizing parties and giving interviews, I was actually creating this company. And there are a few important things that both of you have forgotten. I clicked on the screen and opened the document. Black and white lines of text reflected on the screen like lines of a verdict. First of all, let me remind you that I own 55% of Greenshin Technologies. When the company was incorporated 13 years ago, Dad gave Kelly and me 27% of the shares each, and kept 46% for himself. But remember how 5 years ago we needed additional financing to expand. We were looking for ways to stay afloat without sacrificing growth. "Dad, you sold me 12% of your shares that day because you were too busy at the Kelly Award ceremony to look through the paperwork." Their faces began to turn pale. Kelly gripped the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "It's impossible," she whispered, and there was an uncertainty in her voice that I hadn't heard since childhood. "Dad would never do that." "He did," I interjected. She picked up more documents. "And that's not all. Does software generate 90% of our company's revenue? It does not belong to Greenshin Technologies. It belongs to my private company Innovate Solutions LLC. Greenshin Technologies only has a license to use it." I looked at my watch, or rather at my driver's license, because the reminder was there, next to the photo. This agreement expired about 15 minutes ago. Dad slowly sank into an armchair, shock and dawning realization reflected on his face, as if he suddenly realized that he was standing on sand, thinking that it was granite. "The extension documents," he muttered, as if remembering, "the ones you asked me to sign last week." "I haven't read them," he said in a strangled voice, which sounded uncertain, as if the memory of a moment that had suddenly returned, an opportunity that he had thoughtlessly rejected. "I helped Kelly plan the party." "Exactly. I told them and decided not to send them," he added, as if hoping that an explanation would change something, that a simple confession would eliminate the consequences. Kelly's face contorted with anger, her eyes flashed lightning, and her lips trembled with rage, which she could no longer hide as her carefully constructed picture began to rapidly collapse. "You manipulative, careful little sister," she spat, almost attacking. I warned her by raising my hand, gently, but with a clear, iron message in this gesture: "Stop, otherwise it will get worse." "You might want to hear the rest before you finish the sentence," I said calmly, maintaining confidence even when everything inside was buzzing with tension. "While you were busy celebrating my so-called graceful departure last night, I was doing something else, something much more important. I sent emails, hundreds of them, each one precise, clear, and addressed to those who really mattered to the company. You see, most of our large clients have signed a contract with Greenshin Technologies not only because of the company name. They signed the contract because of me, my experience, my leadership qualities, and my results, and I knew this firsthand. I negotiated myself. I sat in dozens of meetings, explaining the prospects, defending the architecture of the systems, demonstrating reliability. Many of them have personal loyalty clauses in their contracts, clauses that allow them to leave if I ever leave the company. And last night I told them I was leaving. I clicked on my tablet and opened my mailbox. Several dozen responses have already been received, short, clear, and to the point. Some just wrote, "With you until the end." Others clarified where the project teams should be transferred. I looked directly at Kelly and Dad, my voice calm but firm, like granite under a flat surface of water. "Do you want to know how many clients have already activated their termination clauses?" I asked. "Or how many of our best developers, who, by the way, do not work at Greenshin Technologies, but at my separate company Innovate Solutions, have already accepted offers to join my new venture?" The room became quiet, such a silence in which you could hear how the hearts were losing their rhythm. Through the glass walls of the conference room, we saw how people, employees, partners, and managers began to gather. They were checking their phones and reading messages and company updates, all the things that I prudently started sending out right after midnight. Rumors spread like wildfire, especially when they're based on the truth rather than gossip. Kelly's carefully practiced smile faded from her face as she unlocked her phone, her fingers trembling like a pianist who realized that the concert was not going according to the notes. Her ideal world was crumbling, and she realized how little control she really had. "You can't do this," she muttered, but her voice no longer carried the same weight. "The company? The company that you tried to steal from me?" I interrupted her, without giving her any further phrases or allusions. "What did you think you could just take on because you have a brilliant MBA and your father's approval? This company ceased to exist the moment you humiliated me in front of our family and friends." I slowly stood up and smoothed my dress, letting the silence drag on like a tense string about to snap. Then I outlined their options, calmly, in a businesslike manner, without malice, like a doctor giving a diagnosis but offering treatment. "So here's what happens next." I said it clearly, without taking my eyes off both of them, feeling this moment, the culmination of all the years, imprinted on their minds. Option 1, I'm leaving. I'm taking my stocks, my software, my customers, and my employees. Greenshin Technologies becomes an empty shell, just a name on a building, an echo of the company that once mattered. And you can explain to all these investors and partners why the company lost its value overnight. His father's face looked 12 years older than when he entered. The wrinkles deepened, his gaze became dull, his shoulders slumped as the burden of reality fell on him, depriving him of his former greatness. "And option 2?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if every word was an effort. "Option 2, I said, is that you both resign. Right here, right now, I'm taking full control of Greenshin Technologies. You keep your shares as silent partners. You will still receive your dividends, but you will not have a say in the management of the company. Kelly gets a good severance package and brilliant references that will help her find a job somewhere far away from here and start with a clean slate if she has the honesty to admit her mistakes." Kelly's face turned red with anger. "You planned this," she hissed. "You've been waiting for an opportunity to stab us in the back," Kelly said, but there was no longer the same strength in her voice, only resentment mixed with despair, as if she herself had just begun to realize how quickly her illusions were crumbling under the onslaught of reality. I laughed, but there was no joy in it. It was just the weariness of a man who had held back for too long, who had hoped for too long that respect and love could only be earned through patience. "No, Callie. I've spent 12 years trying to be a good daughter and a caring sister," I said without raising my voice, but every word echoed in the room. "While you were taking credit for my work, I was silent. While you were smiling in front of the cameras, I was keeping this company alive, and I wasn't doing it for fame, but because I believed that we were building something more than just a business. I hadn't planned this until 12 hours ago, I continued, looking straight into her pale face, right after you came on stage and called me worthless in front of everyone we know. My phone vibrated. The vibration caused a tremor in the table. Another client terminated the contract. Time is running out, I said softly, without taking my eyes off my sister. What will it be? The next hour flew by in a blur, as if through muddy water. I watched as everything that was once trapped within the boundaries of fear now spills out. Lawyers come, documents are signed, final decisions are made, and every step brings us closer to a new order of things. By noon, I was sitting alone in what was now officially my office, looking out at the city beyond the windows, the same city where I started by fixing cheap laptops in the basement. The company that I built from scratch finally became mine, and it was supposed to bring me a sense of victory, satisfaction, and justice. But instead, all I felt was emptiness, a gaping hole where the family's heart had once been. The damage has been done. Invisible cracks have opened up in the relationship that I have been trying to preserve for so long. The company survived, but my family did not. Trust collapsed like small crystal falling on a tiled floor, and there was no way to put it back together without leaving cuts. The silence in the room seemed heavier than any celebration could dispel. There was no peace in this silence, only the realization that the price was higher than I expected. That evening, my mother came to see me. She hadn't called in advance, just appeared at the door, as if something more than a desire to talk had brought her there. Her eyes were red and tired, as if she had been crying all day, and I immediately felt that her soul was torn between her two daughters. Was it really supposed to end this way? What is it? She asked softly, standing in the doorway, not taking a single step inside, as if she didn't know if she had the right to enter. I stared at her for a long time before answering, and there was more pain in that look than I could put into words. They didn't give me a choice, I said softly. They would have taken everything I built. They would have erased me from my own history and never looked back. She nodded slowly and sadly, and there was understanding in that movement, even if it broke her heart. And what happens now? She whispered, and her voice trembled, like the voice of a mother standing over the ruins of her family. I looked out the window at the horizon, illuminated by the setting sun, as if this light was a symbol of new hope. Now, I said, now I'm rebuilding on my own terms. I put on the table the drawings that I had been working on in silence for several months, documents, graphs, presentations, everything that was kept in the shadows while I waited for the moment. They showed the future that I had planned, new products, cutting-edge innovations, and bold entry into markets that we hadn't even visited yet. Ideas that I've been holding back, waiting for the right moment. And now this moment has come. I'm going to build something even bigger this time. But I'm doing this without the burden of people who once looked into my eyes and saw a man they thought was easy to ignore, a man they thought was useless. Over the next year, Greenshin Technologies flourished under my complete control. We didn't just survive, we tripled our cost. Customers returned, new partnerships were created, and the company finally found itself in the spotlight for all the right reasons. Kelly, dejected by the consequences of her actions, moved to Manhattan. She found a job at a small startup, far from the empire she once believed she could control. I hoped she had grown up. I hoped she'd learned her lesson. Dad quietly retired from business. Retirement suited him. In silence and without responsibilities, he finally saw what he had not noticed for so long. His beloved child almost destroyed everything he had spent his entire life creating. Now we see each other during the holidays. We smile politely, ask each other about our health, and pass mashed potatoes to each other like strangers pretending to be close people. There is a distance between us that never gets shorter. Some wounds just don't heal completely. Sometimes, late at night, I look through old photo albums where we all smile, frozen in happy moments, moments carved out of time like precious stones, polished by nostalgia. There we are, not yet broken, not yet seized by ambitions, still together. I feel a little sad for the family we used to be, for the closeness we lost and which, as it turned out, was much more fragile than I could have imagined at the time. But then I remember that birthday party, a scene that seemed to be carved into the marble of my memory, where every look, every word remained unchanged, like the inscriptions on a monument. I remember Kelly's cold, satisfied smile, the smile of a winner who is sure that the game is won, not noticing that the board is about to turn over. I remember my father nodding in agreement when she hurled words at me that were harsh enough to hurt, indifferent enough to destroy. Respect in business and family is what you earn, not inherit or demand. They both learned that lesson, but it was too late. As for me, I also learned something. I've learned that they're the quiet ones, the underappreciated ones, the ones that everyone ignores, and you should keep an eye on them. We know how to build from scratch. And more importantly, we know how to get everything back if someone tries to steal what belongs to us. My story spread, not as a big scandal, not as front-page news, but as a kind of whispered story in the business world, a reminder that you should never underestimate the wrong person. Lately, when I attend conferences or speak at events, I often hear this murmur, "This is Patricia, the one who never finishes a sentence." They don't need it. My success will put an end to their dreams, because sometimes it only takes one look, one name, to make it clear who is really winning here. Just last week, an invitation arrived. Kelly's old business school, the one where I was once considered insufficiently ambitious, too quiet, too ordinary, wanted me to speak at their graduation ceremony. Topic: Hidden Strengths, the Power of Undervalued Leaders. I said yes. With a slight smile, I began planning my speech, not vindictive, not edifying, but sincere, filled with the kind of experience that money cannot buy and is not taught in lecture halls. Because now I have something to say, and people are finally ready to listen to me. Under my leadership, the company continues to thrive not only in terms of profit, but also in terms of achieving its goals, sustainable growth, inner harmony, and respect, which has now become the true core of our organization's culture. But apart from success, I discovered something else. The world. Peace from the realization that I have remained true to myself. The world is in the choices I've made, even the most difficult ones, even the ones that cost me a lot. Sometimes the most effective thing you can do is prove people wrong without saying a word. And sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. She rises so high that even those who doubted you can't look away. Sitting here in my office, admiring the view of the city landscape outside the window, the very city where once no one believed in my name, I remember what my mother once told me. Success is the best revenge, but the wisdom is to know when to stop chasing revenge and start chasing growth. She was right. I let go of the anger. The pain no longer feeds me. Now I'm creating something important, something lasting, something real. I still have that little gift box that I never gave to my dad. Inside is a photo album that I made for his birthday that year, even before everything collapsed, even before that speech that changed everything. It tells the story of our company, from a tiny dusty repair shop to the empire it has become. I haven't told him yet. Maybe someday I will, when we're well enough. When the silence between us seems less acute, when the past stops being so prickly. Until then, this box will remain on my shelf. A reminder, a quiet symbol of everything that I have built, not out of revenge, not out of a desire to prove, but out of faith in myself, in my right to a place at this table. Every time I was underestimated, I found my strength not in being loud or shouty, but in growing up quietly and confidently on my own terms. Because in the end, our greatest strength often comes from the very parts of ourselves that others are too blind to see.